them at the worst parts, the best parts. This is the best of the rest.
Hello, and it wasn't lies, Jenny. It was acting. Welcome to Best of the Rest, the show where we take a second look at comic book movies that were poorly received upon release, but only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's sometimes a challenge, but always a good time, and this week we are talking The Rocketeer. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by the comic book reader that does all of his own stunts, Andrew Williams. Are you ready to jump into this one, Andrew?
I am. The Rocketeer is a classic that I enjoy a lot, so this is going to be a weird episode.
It actually is yeah. You said it's a classic. I'm like, it's kind of a joke. So it's over 25 years old. I think it's how old something has to be a classic. It's legitimately a classic film now.
It is.
Well, what is your history with this classic piece of cinema, Andrew? Did you watch this a lot growing up?
Yeah, definitely. Like, it was something that even my parents really like. This is another movie my mom really likes. Forgot to record her thoughts on it. One day I'll remember. But yeah, like, obviously this came out in 91, so I was only like 4 when it came out. So it's not something I saw in theaters or anything like that. But almost assuredly saw very heavily as a child, whether it was on television or whatever. And we definitely had it recorded in some capacity back when you used to record stuff off TV and keep it in your own film library. And then you made elaborate spreadsheets specifying what movies were on what VHS tapes.
You
Everybody
get those
did
like
that, right?
those like 300-minute VHS tapes that has like 2 movies on it. So your label is like The Rocketeer slash.
Man, we'd
Phantom.
go even harder. Like we do the slow record or the fast record at the lower quality, so you could get 3 or 4 things on a tape. So you would have you would have the label, and you'd have to write as small as possible to like. But then we never time stamped anything, so if you wanted to watch something, you had to fast forward and just kind of hope to find it. It was not an efficient system.
Embrace the double feature and just let it roll.
Exactly. Had a lot of stuff taped off TV from Christmas specials, so you got all the commercials in, which was the best part, to watch vintage Christmas commercials. But yeah, so back to the point. But yeah, watched this movie a lot growing up. Always a big fan. Even we'll talk about it more later, but like, I was really kind of shocked to read some of the I thought this had a much higher view than I thought it did critically. So we'll get into that more later. But yeah.
Yeah, same. Well, I saw this as a kid. I can't say I watched it all the time. I know I watched it like at least once, and it's one of those movies that just always stuck with me, especially our hero, the Rocketeer. His look, his capabilities, his rocket pack. Awesome. I love this character, but it's not a movie I kept going back to. I don't think we had it in the house, bootleg or otherwise, so I didn't have it ready to play on loop. And even as I got older, it's a movie I always reflected back on. And I even thought for a long time, like, this would be a great movie to readapt or to reboot or to remake or whatever verbiage you want to use, which I know most of the time we're not clamoring for those things and let the classics be classics. And this movie, I like it and it'll always exist, but I think it could really benefit from some of the advancements in technology that we've had since then. I would love someone to give it another shot. And the future of this franchise is actually pretty interesting. And that's something else we can dive into a little bit later.
Yeah. I was going to say, I've got news for you, man.
Well, let's jump into the original, The Rocketeer, the movie that was released June 21st of 1991, made on a budget of $35 million, which is a little modest, but not unheard of. It's the same budget as Batman 89, which turned into a massive hit. This movie did not. At the box office, it just pulls in $47 million. Definitely below expectations and not making any money for the studio. The critic score sits at 66% on Rotten Tomatoes. Now, that's technically certified fresh by their standards, but you could call this mixed territory. It's one of the few movies I've looked up that has a lower audience score, just barely.
What?
But the audience score is 65%, right there with the critics. So again, definitely mixed territory. It has its fans, it has its defenders, but It's not really praised, and it's not getting these second evaluations that you sometimes see. Like, hey, the world was sleeping on the Rocketeer. You should go back to it. There's not really been a big resurgence for this movie.
No, not really. Which is ridiculous.
This is Mystery Men all over again. World, you got this wrong.
You guys, we need to fix this. Everybody, I need us to bump that audience score up to at least 66.
The movie was written by the writing team of Danny Bilson and Paul DeMeo. Now, together, they wrote for the Flash TV series, which started in 1990.
Which is awesome.
I haven't watched it. Is it legitimately awesome?
I like it a lot.
I
I like it quite a bit. That was another one that was like a staple of my childhood. I had a whole bunch of them taped off TV my dad had. But if only for Mark Hamill's episodes as the Trickster.
Did you have a vault in your home with all these bootleg tapes?
They had legit just cabinets that were just all bootleg tapes.
Are they all lost?
Had 100 of them.
Do they still have them at home? Or they lost the time?
They kept some of them, but as things just moved away from, I don't even know if they have a VHS player anymore. So they had a whole cabinet of them. So I don't know, as things moved on to digital disc, things like that. I don't think they have a whole lot of them. I think they kept maybe some of the rarer things that you can't find anymore. But overall, I think most of those are lost to time, as are most people's bootleg VHS collections, I imagine. But no, The Flash I genuinely liked a lot. It's out there. I think you can get it on Vudu and SD and stuff digitally for pretty cheap sometimes. But the costume I like. John Wesley Shipp as the Flash I like. Even, like I said, Mark Hamill as the Trickster is a particular delight. He's in a couple of the episodes. Always fun stuff. So yeah, when I saw that they wrote, I'd somehow missed that they wrote this. So when I saw their names in the credits, I was like, oh, hey, I know those guys.
They were kind of hit or miss as far as writing movies. There's just not a lot of credits to their name. Oddly, the most recent credit is The Five Bloods, the Spike Lee movie from 2020, which this is not the team you'd expect to write a Spike Lee movie. It was actually, their script was originally written in 2013 and it got reworked. They still have credit on the final product.
Mm-hmm.
It was actually released postmortemly in Paul DeMeo's case, who passed away in 2018, so R.A.P. Paul. But interestingly, they do have a lot of credits in video games as well. This sort of seems to be where they finally found their niche. Writing for franchises such as The Sims, Harry Potter, Medal of Honor, and the Saints Row series.
James Bond, too.
Yeah, they 007.
Just a wild run of video games there.
There is a story credit by William Deere, who is a director and was attached to the project at one point, and some of his changes remained in the script, so he's got that story credit. Known for directing Harry and the Hendersons, Angels in the Outfield, and Wild America. All parts of our childhood. Wild America in particular, that's the one I watched a lot growing up.
Yeah. Yes, Harry and the Hendersons was another one in the vault. I'm just going to start referring to things in the vault.
These creators made no money off the Williams family.
No. No, sir.
The movie's ultimately directed by Joe Johnston. Now, Joe is a VFX artist originally who makes his directorial debut with Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, has also directed Jumanji and Jurassic Park 3, so plenty of blockbusters. But looking back at his filmography now, he's kind of become known as the guy who takes a nostalgic look back at 50s and 40s America and classic Hollywood, with movies like this one here, The Rocketeer, also October Sky, which is a really good movie, starring the greatest actor of all time, Jake Gyllenhaal, and Captain America, the First Avenger. He kind of became the guy, if your movie is set in World War II era America, Joe Johnston's your guy. He's got it down.
Pretty much. Also, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. So, just, if you're talking classic America, it doesn't get any more classic than Rick Moranis, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
And he designed the Iron Giant in The Iron Giant, which is very much in the same vein.
Oh yeah, but and then he was also he was a visual effects artist on Star Wars. He was a visual effects artist on Indiana Jones, Willow, all of these things. He was associate producer. So he was around Hollywood for a long time, working under guys like George Lucas and Steven Spielberg and Ron Howard, and then just kind of finally in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, just bumped his way into, just, moved his way up into directing. Not that he didn't earn his way there, but, and then, he became very kind of known for a very particular style. Like when they announced him as doing Captain America, I remember being like, oh, the Rocketeer guy. Like, yeah, of course. Like, why wouldn't you? Like, why wouldn't you get that guy for Captain America? Like, it just made perfect sense. So
I imagine they were like, hey, the Winter Soldier, we're going to go with someone else. And Joe was like, oh, okay. Makes sense. Yeah, I did my part.
It's in modern times? Yeah, I'm out. Bye. Doesn't make sense.
Joe Johnson, born in Austin, Texas. So cool.
Repping the home state there.
Yeah. All right, Andrew. Yeah, I think it's time we jump into this movie.
I think so.
Fly into this movie? Soar into this movie?
Fly, yeah. Jet into this movie.
Jet into this movie. Rocket
into this movie.
Okay. All that is making
more adults.
Stunt pilot Cliff's Accord, along with mentor and mechanic Peavy, are looking for the next big thing that will make them stand out at the local air show and move on to the national circuit. When a stolen rocket pack is stashed away in their garage, they discover just the thing they were looking for. After learning to fly with the rocket, with the help of a new helmet designed by Peavy, Cliff makes his public debut during a mid-air rescue at the next air show, and the press dubs him the Rocketeer. The publicity grabs the attention of the FBI, who are after the rocket on behalf of its inventor, Howard Hughes. Also hot on the Rocketeer's trail is the local mob, hired by actor and secret Nazi spy Neville Sinclair. When Cliff's aspiring actress girlfriend is captured by Sinclair, he dons the rocket one last time to save her and ensure that the device doesn't fall into the wrong hands. I like how Nazis just pop up at the end of this.
I mean, they were there the whole time. We just didn't know it.
Which is the true message of the story.
Yes.
But I love the idea of Nazis as just movie villains, right? You've got monsters, you've got invaders from outer space, you've got Nazis. Things that we can all agree
can't go
should
wrong.
Be punched in the face.
100%.
Well, Andrew, let's jump into the cast of this movie, and you know what we're going to do. We're going to start with the best casting, the best performance of the movie. We always recognize one person who goes above and beyond the call of duty to give a performance that elevates the quality of the entire film, or at least the role that they were given. We recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. Andrew, kick us off. Who gets your Mark Strong Award for The Rocketeer?
Well, I'd hate to let you down, Chris, so I got to give it to Timothy Dalton as Neville.
I knew it. I knew it. I called before we hit record. I called it. This was a Andrew Mark Strong Award winner role. This is Xander from The Phantom.
Yeah, this is Treat Williams from The Phantom. Yeah. This is exactly the same vibe. But no, I really, a hero's only as good as his villain, and for this one, the villain came to play. Timothy Dalton, obviously, like no stranger to anything. The former James Bond himself, really good at playing the villain. And here he's playing. Obviously, Neville Sinclair is meant to be a riff on like Errol Flynn. Like obviously, he's got the movie they show him shooting is Robin Hood in everything but name only, basically.
Okay, hang on. You say obviously, which I did recognize the production as basically Robin Hood, but tell me about this character, this actor that this character is based on.
So Errol Flynn was a notable actor who was from that era of Hollywood, who notably played Robin Hood. But generally was known for similar kind of swashbuckling performances. But the key thing that this movie integrated was that in 1980, a biography of Errol Flynn came out that, amongst many other things, implied that he was essentially a Nazi spy. This was kind of a big thing because people didn't really have any idea. Don't get me wrong. There are a lot of things about, like, if you Google Errol Flynn, you will find out that the dude was far less than on the level. There are plenty of stories about weird stuff in his house so that he could spy on his guests. Like, lots of very strange things, which they do, again, incorporate a little bit into Neville's house here with all the secret doors and the hidden everything. But the book alleged that he was a Nazi sympathizer, if not a straight-up spy. So obviously this movie doesn't just use Errol Flynn. There are some real life people that show up in this movie, but ultimately that allegation has been pretty rebuffed in the years since, but it wasn't rebuffed until like the late 80s, long after the script had been written, and so they kind of just left it in. But this was Errol Flynn's go-to, was the swashbuckling Robin Hood type performances. And so there's a lot of that here on display with Timothy Dalton, and then obviously the ultimate twist, I think, was just riffing on that at the time. But speaking to Timothy Dalton's performance as Neville Sinclair, he's just chewing the scenery every chance he gets. He's charming, but he's also kind of gross. And then he's also like secretive, but he's also like oddly transparent at times. Like the scene where he's trying to like woo Jennifer Connelly to his side, and she just keeps pointing out that everything he's saying are just lines from his movies, like stuff like that. But he's playing it all so well. And then just immediately switches and has a German accent once he's revealed as like a Nazi spy. But it's just a great scenery chewing performance where he's making the most of every sequence he's got. And yeah, it's definitely picking up the movie for me.
Yeah, I do love that performance. I love his mustache. He's got a bad guy's mustache. It doesn't quite come out and curl into like little
right. Not full Snidely Whiplash, but
it doesn't go all the way there. But it's definitely enough. And he's just so gross. And it's funny, he's James Bond. I think he was technically still James Bond at the time this movie came out. And I look at him here and I'm like, well, this guy, he can only play villains. Look at him. He's got a villain's face. And it's so funny that James Bond is very much I almost said American hero. I guess he's not an American hero. Very much a cinema hero. And this couldn't be more opposite, but he plays it so well. You can just tell that he loved playing this character.
Oh, yeah. I think he had a lot of fun with it. Well, and like, why wouldn't you? You get to do so much cool stuff with this. Like, you've got the sequences where he's just like acting in the films and he's like getting to play like the Errol Flynn type character. And then he's got the sequences where he's kind of being the schmoozing womanizer. And then he's got the scenes where he's arguing with the mob. And then ultimately he's in the big finale that takes place on a friggin' blimp. So like, there's a lot of cool stuff. There's a lot of cool stuff in this movie, guys. Go watch it now. Seriously.
His death scene might be my favorite special effects shot in the movie.
It's pretty great. But yeah, he's making the most of every single moment he's got in this movie. And you can't help but feel like it's, like I said, the hero's only as good as the villain. And in this case, he got a really good one.
Well, I agree. It's a great performance. I certainly loved it. I'm glad you're recognizing him with the Mark Strong Award. I'm taking it in a different direction. And I'm going to give my Mark Strong Award to Alan Arkin as Peavy, who I think is really the heart of this movie, which you would think it might be someone else. But I think it's really him and his relationship with Cliff and the Rocketeer that I think really drives, again, the emotional core of this movie, the heart of this movie. He has such a fun relationship with him. He's not his dad. It's not quite paternal, but it's like a mentor relationship, like a really close mentor relationship. And he sort of accepts Cliff for all of his faults, and they keep each other in check and in balance. And I think Alan Arkin, he's he kind of, with his voice, it's always been a little gravelly. He's almost like a little rough around the edges, but has an emotional core that it just works so well, especially in a period piece like this. It's a little bit funny for me to see Alan Arkin here because I Alan Arkin kind of came onto my radar a little bit late in his career.
Yeah.
So like Little Miss Sunshine might be the first time I actually took notice of this guy, where he's very much not this character. He very much is that rough around the edges, crude character.
Yeah.
Who still has heart. And Get Smart came out around that time, and that's kind of the Alan Arkin that was seared into my brain. So then I go back and see him here, and I'm like, oh, it's like young Alan Arkin. Not
He's
really.
Still not that young.
Yeah. It's like seeing Ian McKellen in The Shadow. It's like, oh, young Ian McKellen. It's like, well, no. He's just not this 60-something-year-old guy that I'm used to seeing. So it's cool to see him here. I think he plays this part so well, super sweet. And it's that relationship between him and our lead that sold the movie for me. And I've gotta give it up to old Al there. I love... you can talk about Alan in a second here, but the last little bit about a character that I really like, it's small, but Cliff kind of gives him a hard time. He's like, you haven't been on a date since, however many years. And Peavy reflects back and he's like, well, after dating her, what's the point of dating anybody else? And it's a small little moment that kind of tells you about his character. Like, his life is now this garage and hanging out with Cliff and working on these machines and these plans. And at the very end of the movie, like the very, very end, he's trying to talk to Cliff about his ideas for the rocket pack and improvements that he can make. But Cliff is busy making out with Jennifer Connelly, and he looks up and he's like, oh, and he goes off to talk to someone else who's going to listen to him.
Yeah.
Like, his life is truly about his work and his engineering, but not in a sad way. It's like, this is what makes him happy and what keeps him going. And I just really like the character.
No, I agree. Alan Arkin is always great. Like I said, I definitely became more aware of him in his late stage stuff, like Little Miss Sunshine, Argo. I really like his performance in Argo. I think he's really having fun there. But like, that's very much like Alan Arkin basically like plays Alan Arkin now. Like, it feels like every movie he's in now, he's just doing that Little Miss Sunshine character because, I mean, he won an Academy Award for it. So everyone wants that rough around the edges, crotchety, crass old man now.
Yeah.
But like, seeing him here with hair, no less, is very strange because I have that image of him from like post 2000s. But yeah, he really is great here. He's got that mentor role. I mean, him and Cliff live in the same house apparently, so I don't really know what's going on there, but he's acting kind of as a father figure, kind of as a moral compass, a little bit of everything. But yeah, he's keeping it grounded, and then he's got his work, and he's got all these ideas, he's got all these plans, but, at the end of the day, he's always there to help Cliff as well. So, and he manages to give Howard Hughes a few pointers. So, like, it doesn't get much bigger than that.
Alan Arkin is 87 years old now.
That doesn't shock me, which means that when this movie was made 30 years ago, or 40 now. No, is it 30? Yeah.
40. Andrew, how old are you making me? Hang on, it's 30 years old, 31 years old.
This movie is 31 years old, which means that when he made it, he was 56. So
already an old
not
man.
exactly a young man. It was interesting to me. They said they wanted Lloyd Bridges for this role, but he turned it down, and I just wasn't sure how old Lloyd Bridges would have been at the time either. But he probably would have been way past 57.
So they went for this young whippersnapper, Alan Arkin.
Yes, they did. So Lloyd Bridges was born in 1913.
Holy cow.
So if they had cast him in 1990, say, he would have been 77. I can't imagine. Then again, like, I joke, but then he was on Seinfeld after that. But yeah, that would have been he would have just felt like an old man because Lloyd Bridges was an old man. But hey, he's Jeff Bridges' dad, so that counts for something.
Well, let's talk about the lead of this movie, our hero, Billy Campbell. Our hero, Andrew, you and I's hero, Billy Campbell, who plays Cliff Secord / the Rocketeer. A great performance. It just was big for the Mark Dong Award, but he nails this pulp 1930s serials type hero, right? And this is not a backhanded shot at Billy Campbell, but that hair is doing 50% of the work, right?
Oh yeah,
the classic
100%.
hero. It's the Brendan Fraser from The Mummy hair. It's the classic. It's always not in his face like a bad boy, but it's always perfectly feathered to the side. It's just wonderful hair. Whenever you give somebody a great punch, which he has an amazing punch in this movie, we get to see it a few times. It whips in just the right way. It is, again, 50% of the performance is that hairstyle.
It is. Billy Campbell, obviously not a huge star going into this. That was apparently a point of contention with Disney that they wanted somebody more well-known. Apparently, I think they said Johnny Depp might have been their first choice or something. But
I can see that visually, but
I can't see it in the performance, though.
You're right. 1991, this is Depp starting to go into his classic Depp phase, kind of weirdo outsider phase, and that is not what this character is, which I think it's funny that Disney's number one choice was Johnny Depp in 91, right? And then he goes on to do Edward Scissorhands, Ed Wood, Dead Man, all the weird stuff he does.
All these other,
90s. And then by the time you get to the Pirates of the Caribbean, they're like, no, we don't want Johnny Depp in a Disney movie. What are you thinking?
Yeah, and like some of the other names that were up for this, like Kevin Costner, Matthew Modine were considered, and I can't see either of those. I mean, Dennis Quaid, your boy, Kurt Russell from The Big Lebowski, Bill Paxton, Emilio Estevez, like all of them. I'm just like, man, I don't. And then like Vincent D'Onofrio turned it down. I'm like, man, what like a laundry list of like anybody who's anybody, like
Yeah.
and then finally they get Billy Campbell.
Vincent D'Onofrio is another one that I really can't see. Something about that dude's voice. The dude's got such a distinct, strange voice, and I don't see
I
it
can't
on the
imagine this
Rocketeer.
guy with like the Rocketeer with like the Kingpin speaking patterns. Just,
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
so strange. But yeah, so they had to sell Disney on Billy Campbell, and apparently Joe Johnston was able to bring them around. As well as, we didn't talk about this, but the script, apparently Bilson and DeMeo said they got fired like 3 times from this movie over the course of production and got hired back. And like
The story seems to be that Disney was after the merchandising value of the property and the toys, which means you got to make a family-friendly action caper.
right.
And not that their script was super racy, but it was definitely, I don't know, a little more mature than Disney was looking for. Our love interest was at one point a nude model in Hollywood versus an actress. So there were some concessions that had to be made to make it a little bit more family friendly.
Yeah, I like to think that they got paid 3 times though, so good for them.
You like to think that, but that's
You like to think, but
probably
this is Disney.
not what happened. Speaking of that love interest, though, Jenny Blake is the character's name, brought to life by Jennifer Connelly. Wonderful choice, especially for this era. This is, post Labyrinth. This is Jennifer Connelly all grown up and being the love interest of our lead hero. And I like that. I pointed out anytime they don't reduce her to a damsel in distress. She is kidnapped at the end, but she handles her own throughout the movie, knocking people out left and right with the vase to the back of the head. Her signature move. I love it.
She knocks out James Bond. I mean, it doesn't get more fight for yourself than that. I mean, it's
Yeah.
But that was a change from the comics, because in the comics she is that model, and they switch it to kind of just being the kind of burgeoning actress here. And I actually like that better, honestly. I think it's a little less stereotypical for like a classic damsel in distress type, where we're just turning her into like literally a sex object. And obviously the attractiveness is part of it here, but they're using it in different ways. And I think it's a lot more effective, and it's definitely more for the character to go with. There's more to sink your teeth into. There's a lot more to work, just play off of with the other actors. So I like that change, and I think she's a great choice. Like you said, this is post Labyrinth, but we're still a good decade plus from Hulk, so she'll get her next shot at comic books eventually. But yeah, doing a great job here. I think it's a great performance, and she's like you said, she gets to hold her own more than once in this movie, which is cool.
I love that our character isn't like smitten with Cliff for being the Rocketeer. She doesn't care at all. He's like,
she doesn't even know who the Rocketeer is.
He's like, I gotta tell you something. I'm the Rocketeer. And she literally says, the Rocka who? And he's like, oh, don't you read the paper? She's like, no, I'm busy. I got a career. I'm acting. Like, I don't care who you are.
Yeah. That's a great line. That's a great exchange. Like, because like genuinely, honestly, it broke in the papers that day that this Rocketeer existed.
Right.
So if she hadn't read them, she would have no idea who he is. So perfect. Classic.
Terry O'Quinn plays Howard Hughes. Fictionalized version of Howard Hughes, we could say, but Howard Hughes very much the again, the romanticized version of him, the Hollywood version of him, the great inventor and visionary. Not that he wasn't actually those things, but we are only presenting the high points of Howard Hughes.
Yeah, we're avoiding the bad stuff.
Sure. So, I mean, pretty good performance. He looks nothing like Leonardo DiCaprio, so I got to knock him a few points there. Not.
Or
really
is it
visually.
DiCaprio doesn't look like Terry O'Quinn?
No, DiCaprio makes no mistakes, Andrew.
Isn't that movie like 15 years after this one?
I think audiences these days probably know him best as the character John Locke from Lost, a show that I haven't personally watched, but when I saw a picture of him as that character, I'm like, oh yeah, I've seen that guy. Even if you haven't seen Lost, you're familiar with this character on that show. Good turn as Howard Hughes. There's not much to say about it.
Yeah, I mean he's the creator of the X3 pack, basically, and that's
Excuse me, Rocket Pack, Andrew.
Rocket Pack. I'm sorry, But yeah, so how the idea in this movie is that Howard Hughes is the creator of this rocket pack that has become part of this struggle between the Americans and the Nazis, who are trying to build their own rocket pack force. And they actually had like an animated propaganda film made showing off these Nazi rocket troopers, and I'm just like, wow, this looks terrifying. I'm glad I'm glad the Rocketeer saved us from this. Like, my God. But
I love that little animated film. I mean, I love it in in the context,
in a sense of like, yeah, they put the work into that. But Terry O'Quinn's great. Like, the Lost is definitely he has a turn as as a rather unsavory serial killer. Most serial killers are unsavory, but in The Stepfather, which was a low budget slasher of the late 80s, he plays the main guy there, where he's very duplicitous and it's a very good performance in a movie that probably could be featured on this show. But yeah, Terry O'Quinn's great. I think he's like you said, he's playing the very like romanticized Howard Hughes here, who's just an inventor and just making cool things. And nothing bad about the man whatsoever.
Don't ask any questions.
Don't ask any questions. But yeah, he's doesn't have only a few scenes. Gets a big kind of a big moment at the end where he gets to kind of prop our hero back up and gets to be part of the big save, I guess. So yeah, he gets his moments. Yeah. But yeah, it's definitely we're skimming the surface of Howard Hughes. But yeah, perfectly fine performance.
It's a pretty robust cast. There's a lot we could go through. Different FBI agents and multiple mobsters. There's just a few I want to touch on, though. Paul Sorvino plays Eddie Valentine. And if you can't tell by that name, he's the mob boss. Love that name for a mobster. Eddie Valentine. Perfect. And he is... the role was written with Joe Pesci in mind, and he ultimately didn't take the part, but you can definitely see that. You can see Joe Pesci in this role. You can see just, you look at the guy's face and the lines he delivers and the suit he's dressed in and the hat. And he's, I don't say generic mob boss because that sounds like it's insulting the character, not a good performance. But Andrew, it's generic mob boss, yeah?
Yeah, he knows what he's doing. I mean, his name is Eddie Valentine. I mean, it's very, very, this is the late 30s. He's as vintage Cagney mob boss as it can get.
And lastly, Tiny Ron Taylor plays Lothar, who is he's the muscle for Neville Sinclair. He shows up a few times to be the muscle to be the strong guy, and he's a giant man in real life and in the movie. This actor was 7 feet tall, passed away in 2019. R.I.P. Tiny Ron. Andrew, I'm just going to read you the first note I took on this guy when he showed up on my screen. Straight from my notes, it says, Dick Tracy villain looking motherfucker.
Yep. 100%.
Huge dude in a suit, and he's got this big, huge cartoonish jawline. Just giant.
Yeah.
Lots of prosthetics on this guy to make him look like he's right off the page of a Dick Tracy pulp comic.
100%. And this guy is also, talk about more later, the character of Lothar is from the comics, and he looks just like this. So they put in the work, did the prosthetics, and they're going straight for that look. But yeah, this is there's, I mean, Clint Howard's in this cast, John Polito's in this cast. I mean, this is so many people. There's people in here movie that play Clark Gable, W.C. Fields, like, they really go pretty hard, but we've covered most of the high points here. Any other shout outs though? Or is he the last one?
Well, one more for Tiny Ron, because he's an actor that I knew. I just didn't realize I knew who he was. I know him from Police Squad, the most underrated TV show of all time. Eventually led into the Naked Gun series. He's the cop at the police station who is always off frame because he's so tall.
He is, isn't he?
That's the whole
yes.
bit. Yeah.
Oh man, I'd forgotten about that. I knew that name was familiar. I'd looked it up before, I'm sure, but that's awesome.
But yeah, I mean that covers the high points of the performances. Our main players here. There might be some small bit parts we can get to as we talk about the movie, but let's go ahead and jump into it, Andrew. Specifically, the best scene of the movie, or at least our favorite scenes of the movie. Andrew, in your opinion, when is this movie firing on all cylinders? I say that all the time. It might never have been more appropriate than this movie here. When is it blasting on both. Why am I changing it? It already works. When is this movie firing on all cylinders? What is the best scene in The Rocketeer?
The moment where this movie loads the spaceship with the rocket fuel, 100%, is it's the finale for me. The whole big final fight on the blimp. Like I can't.
Okay, you were doing a thing. I thought you were. I was like, wait, what did I miss? They load a spaceship.
That's an Ultimate Warrior thing.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Okay. Of course, I'm sure everybody is right there with you, understanding that reference.
At least one, if not two, of our fans are going to know that. But no, so obviously we've gone through the movie at this point. We know Neville Sinclair is a Nazi, and at this point, we know the pack belongs to Howard Hughes. And,
Rocket Pack, Andrew.
Sorry. So at this point, we have established that Neville Sinclair is a Nazi. We have also established that the Rocket Pack belongs to Howard Hughes, but Cliff needs to go save Jenny from Neville Sinclair and these gentleman gangsters. And so he escapes from Howard Hughes' place and goes to get the pack and do this final confrontation with them. And so it literally is this big, we get the FBI versus the gangsters, we get the gangsters versus the Nazis, we get, everybody turns on everybody, there's all this gunfire, and then, after all of that, we end up on a blimp, and we get the whole big final fight and sequences on a blimp, and at this point, they're battling back and forth with Neville Sinclair. At that point, they're on top of the blimp, they get saved by Howard Hughes and Peavy. There are so many cool, awesome things happening in this finale. You get everything that you would want out of a big motion picture blockbuster set piece is here. And I had every single second, I was like, this is just getting cooler and cooler and cooler. And then when you think it can't get any more awesome, Timothy Dalton crashes a pack into the land part of the Hollywood land sign.
It's what's it called? What's he crashed?
Oh, sorry. And then when you think it can't get any cooler, Timothy Dalton crashes his rocket pack into the land part of the Hollywood land sign, giving the coolest explanation for what happened to that part of the sign ever.
Yes.
And, but yeah, just every single thing. It just builds more and more and more and more, and it's awesome. It's just a fun, awesome set piece to end this movie with.
There's a lot. Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of good beats throughout this. I love that it takes place on a blimp. Just so true
Unique.
To the era, right? Where we were, for some reason, obsessed with blimps. The most that is the pinnacle of that line from Jurassic Park, before you figured out if you should. I always mess it up.
You were so concerned with whether or not you could, you never stopped to think if you should.
Yes, that one. Because what the hell is the point of a blimp? The most useful a blimp has ever been is giving us an aerial view of a football stadium while advertising tires. That is it.
There was a point where I think people thought it was going to be the best way to do mass transit, because at the time, I don't think people thought planes were going to be able to successfully fly more than 2 people at a time.
And then
so
the Hindenburg blew up. We were like, wait a minute. It's actually a horrible idea to fly a big ball of flammable glass.
I mean, what are planes filled with? But yeah, I mean, you got a giant ticking time bomb on top of your blimp that's just waiting for trouble. But I read something the other day that was there's only 33 blimps left in existence, and they're almost all used in
they're useless, Andrew.
Well, they're all used blimps? For promotional crap. None of them are used for yeah, there's literally I would have thought there would have been people would have preserved more of them just for the sake of having them around, but apparently there's just not that many blimps left.
Let them die. Who cares? Blimps suck.
Wow.
I do.
Chris, what do you think about blimps? Fuck them.
I don't know why I'm so passionate about my hatred for blimps, but
I was caught off guard by your passionate anti-blimp stance.
Yeah, I love this finale though. I love that we kind of get our fully formed hero here, because this movie is basically an origin story for the Rocketeer. He learns to fly, etc., etc. Well, at the end is the first time he's kind of fighting bad guys, and he's got a nice big action hero pose before he flies up to the blimp, where he's got his rocket pack strapped on, he's got his helmet, and what's he have in his hand? The classic pulp character weapon, a pistol. All of these characters, the Shadow, the Phantom, they got their fists and they got pistols. That's their special power. I love it. I genuinely love it. It's so good. A lot of good beats throughout. On top of the blimp, we get like a fist fight with with Lothar, a big a big hunkering bad guy. Yeah. And I love he climbs onto the top and then he straps this belt around his waist. I'm like, is that like a weightlifting belt? Is he like about to move some furniture? Is that like so he doesn't hurt himself while he's fighting the Rocketeer? But no, there's a cord attached to the belt and it's strapping him so he doesn't fall. Very smart of our villain. Safety first. However, ironically, it's that safety belt that ends up being his demise, because as this thing is blowing up, because of course it blows up, because it's a blimp and incredibly impractical, he tries to take off running, and he's tethered to the blimp by this cord, and he dies in a fiery crash. As does...
That's going to be... I was like, it's going to be our first shirt. Blimps suck.
They do. As does our villain die in a fiery crash, like you mentioned. So to set this up, that our hero chews gum. This ends up being the most important aspect of this entire movie. Our hero is always chewing gum, and it's a nasty habit. He's always stashing it somewhere because it's inappropriate to fly with it or to walk into certain buildings with it, and he puts it away somewhere. So at one point, the rocket pack gets a hole in it, right? So like the fuel is leaking out, which is bad because that means the whole thing could ignite. So PV, in his infinite wisdom, pulls the chewing gum out of Cliff's mouth and seals up the hole with the chewing gum, which is a great ad for whatever brand of chewing gum that is, that it can withhold that pressure. So
Beeman's chewing gum.
Half this movie, this hole is plugged with chewing gum. Well, before Cliff hands over the rocket to the bad guy, he rubs the chewing gum off, exposing the hole, so that whenever Sinclair tries to fly off on it, it ignites, and midair, he just turns into a big fireball. And I genuinely mean it when I say this is my favorite special effects shot of the movie. Hashtag positivity podcast, but a lot of the flying effects in this movie are a bit dated, even for 91. They were kind of rough. They were kind of Superman 3 levels of flying effects. But at any rate, this fireball looks really good. He falls to his death, and I love when the big villain just turns into a pathetic coward in their final moments. It's when they get their comeuppance and they're just like crying and whining. Timothy Dalton plays it up so well as he's falling to his death. Like you said, he hits the Hollywood land sign, destroys the land, leaves it as Hollywood. Canonically, that is how we got the Hollywood sign now.
Yep, that's my headcanon, that's for sure.
You know what else I love about this? This is, like I said, Nazis don't really show up to the end of this movie, and we get this Nazi blimp, because of course the Nazis would use a blimp, and all of the Nazis on the blimp, this is like the first time you hear them all talking. Andrew, they don't get subtitles when they talk.
No.
Because who cares what they have to say?
Right, I agree. They're Nazis. Yeah, the whole Nazi subplot of this movie is pretty well hidden until you get the twist with Neville, where Jenny finds like his secret radio room to Germany and finds like the books and everything with the Nazi symbols on them.
And which book is the one that she has to pull to move the bookcase and to get into the secret area?
The Conquests of Casanova, because of course.
So appropriate for his character. I love it.
But yeah, so that part is actually, it's pretty well hidden. And then at the end, and then just magically this like battalion of Nazi troops just appears during this final fight. And
where do you hide a blimp?
It's just like appears from like behind this building. It's pretty amazing.
Pretty bold to have like the swastika on the side of it. Like everybody who sees this blimp flying, like, oh, that's Nazis.
Well, before they watch the movie, they watch a Neville Sinclair movie earlier in the movie. Like they straight up have the Nazis are like sending this blimp on like a U.S. tour or something. Like they say they're doing that. So like the war starts September 1st, 39. So this is 38. So we haven't quite gotten to the actual war yet. So at this point, Germany's still like playing coy about what they're doing. And so the idea of them doing some kind of propaganda blimp exchange, whatever, with America is not necessarily out of the question. At this point, people were already hearing about what he was doing, though. So like we're a year out. Things are already progressing. But yeah, but still, it's a blimp that just shows up from behind a building.
It is truly a great finale. It's you can tell where a big part of the budget went. Just so much good stuff happening there. It's not what I picked as my favorite scene, but it's certainly a worthy scene. I'm gonna go with a different action set piece, and let me explain why, Andrew. My favorite scene of the movie is the mid-air rescue of the pilot by the Rocketeer, his first public appearance.
Yes.
So at the air show, Cliff, who normally flies, his plane was destroyed. And a sort of save face because he's not there on time. A buddy of his, who is a little bit out of practice,
Malcolm,
takes his plane up in the air to participate in the air show. And the plane malfunctions because he's flying an older model that's not quite up to code, you could say. And everybody on the ground can tell there's smoke flying out of the airplane, that something is going wrong. So Cliff, because he's a hero, puts on the rocket and he flies up to save him. And when this is happening, I gotta admit, I don't know what he's gonna do, flying up there, but it's pretty good because at first he literally flies into the bottom of the airplane and his head comes through into the cockpit and he's looking up at Malcolm. He gets knocked out and we get some fun. Once he flies up there, we get some good, classic Hollywood stunt performances where he's hanging on to the wings of the plane and pulling Malcolm out. He's, of course, successful. He pulls Malcolm out of the plane, drops onto a big, safety... What do you call that? Big safety balloon thing for crash landings. And it's just good heroics. And the reason I'm picking this one is I like the rocket pack being used in such a specific way, in a unique way, because for most of this movie, even the finale, the rocket pack is simply a means of transportation, which is cool, and that's part of its purpose, but not super unique. And I don't think he's the Rocketeer simply because he can fly one place to another. I think it's because he can do stuff mid-air like this. I think that's what makes him special and stand out. So the fact that he's able to, intersect a plane while in the air and save somebody, I think is more unique to the Rocketeer than the finale we get with the blimp, because in the finale, he just flies to the blimp and almost immediately hands over the rocket pack. And then it's just Cliff, and Cliff is cool. He's got his pistol. He's got his punches. I got no problems with that. But if I'm looking for a scene that exemplifies why the Rocketeer is unique and why this power set is unique, I'm going for this air show rescue. And it also shows that Cliff is a genuine hero. That's my case.
Yeah, but the finale shows he's a hero without the rocket pack, Chris, and that's important too.
Look, it's not a competition.
Except that it is. But no, I agree. This is a great scene, when he's unveiled for the first time. He gets the big moment where he puts on the helmet for the first time, and he asks Peavy, "How do I look?" And he says, "Like a hood ornament," and just throws him out. And that's when he snatches the gum out of his mouth and puts it on the back because he does it for luck. Because he does it right at the beginning of the movie, too, where he sticks it on the back of the plane, and then Peavy pulls it off, and then the plane crashes. So, lesson learned. But, yeah, this is the big reveal. It's cool. And, I love all this idea, because you forget it's the 30s. So, they get the footage of it, and then, all the news people are, running to the phone booths to, call the newspapers and be hold the front page, the Rocket Man. And then, even the whole idea of how they come up with the name The Rocketeer is the guy's trying to almost use it as a promotion thing for his gas company, and just all of it. It's a really great reveal scene. Like you said, you get the uniqueness of using it as a tool in itself, not just as transport. But yeah, it's a great scene. That's Eddie Jones playing Malcolm, by the way. Eddie Jones of Willie, well-known kind of character actor. I remember him notably as Pa Kent in Dean Cain's turn as Superman. But yeah, great first reveal scene. Up there with stuff like Green Lantern, I say.
I love the design of the Rocketeer. I love this character. Yeah. I said in the beginning, he looks so awesome. Sort of a old school Iron Man look to his helmet. The rocket pack, super awesome. The pilot's jacket, I love everything about it. It looks so cool.
We talked about the poster for this movie. The poster for this movie is perfect, but it's got that whole look on display, that whole World's Fair look. But yeah, just the helmet, and they apparently in the 80s, Disney wanted to change the helmet, and you're like, why? The helmet is one of the coolest parts. Like, it's why would you do that? But yeah,
But I
fantastic.
love that the characters in this movie are constantly a little bit, yellow spandex moment, like it's
Yeah.
like a hood ornament. I would love for him to be like, "How do I look?" And PV to go, "You look badass, dude. Like, get out there. That's awesome. I do some good work."
Yeah, it's that helmet. Like, I love that there's a scene where he's building the helmet because, like, in the comics, there's another scene where he's like measuring his head and trying to figure out all the dimensions for the helmet. And I think even in the comic, he makes fun of the helmet when he first gets it. So he thinks it looks kind of auspicious, and so I guess they're kind of keeping within that vibe for what's going on here. But it's such a cool, and now it's iconic. Like, the Rocketeer is like, if you're a fan of this or even comics in general, almost everybody knows how the Rocketeer stands apart from similar people. So
As they're putting the pieces together for his final look, they got the rocket, the helmet, he wears this jacket. I'm wondering, like, well, it's got these big flames coming out of the back. What are they gonna do to like protect his legs so he doesn't get burned?
nothing.
Nothing. He just doesn't get burned. Just don't ask. It just looks awesome. Let it go.
Just don't get burned.
What if like because he flies in like not a Superman pose because his arms out in front of him, his arms like by his side, but he flies in such a distinctive way with a straight body. What if he had to fly like in the fetal position so his legs weren't,
Just so his legs
in the
don't get
way of the
burned.
flame? Wouldn't look nearly as cool.
It would not, but yeah, just a great look. There's so many cool things in this movie. It's unbelievable, but the look is the one that I'm very glad that like the rocket pack is a slightly different design. In the comics, it's more like a single rocket. Whereas in this one, they kind of make it 2 rockets, but that's fine. The jacket, the helmet, all of it. Like I told you, the poster, I think I'm going to have to go buy one. See if I can find a Rocketeer poster just so that I can own it. But just fantastic stuff.
Now, Andrew, we did receive an email about this movie. This
Did we?
email comes from, we did. This email comes from Mike from Maine. Mike actually emailed us pretty early on in our go at this and our run of movies asking about the Rocketeer, and I said we would get there eventually, and here we are, and Mike sent us his thoughts. So here we go. He says, Mark Strong Award goes to Timothy Dalton. Come on. His words.
Come on.
It's as simple as that. He goes on to say, what an adventure and what a stacked cast. It seems like every supporting player is a well-respected character actor from the past 30 years. I was almost distracted by saying him too, her too, every 5 minutes. This movie began my love for 40s fashion and Art Deco architecture, and the Rocketeer's iconic costume fascinated me as a kid. Some of the staging and camera speed ramping seems a bit hokey today, but they really pushed their budget as far as it could go. The actors and sets look amazing. While the movie wasn't a blockbuster, Marvel Studios did go to its director, Joe Johnston, for the old Hollywood style he pulled off so well here for its first Captain America movie. The first Avenger holds a special place for me because it feels like the big budget Rocketeer sequel I'd always wanted. With the recent short-lived kids show and the announced Disney Plus sequel coming soon, the Rocketeer is getting an opportunity at a second chance. Thanks, y'all. Love the show. #PP. Thank you, Mike, for the email. Yes. And I know Andrew is excited to have someone back him up in the Mark Strong Award with Timothy Dalton.
Course. I mean, but he really is right about this cast. Like even the names we didn't mention, like William Sanderson from Blade Runner is here. Hell, Melora Hardin, who's Jan from The Office, plays the singer at the South Seas Club. Like
I didn't even catch that. That's awesome.
Like Margot Martindale, who's in Justified and a host of other things, plays like the main woman at the diner they all hang out at. That's shaped like a bulldog, and it really is just like person after person after person after person. Where if like you've been watching, especially things from the time, like you're going to see all these people that you've heard of and know from a variety of things.
I love that he says he's been fascinated with the look of the costume of the Rocketeer since a kid. Because, like, same. I didn't watch this movie a ton growing up, as I said, but, like, the look of this character has always stuck with me. It is so cool. I love the idea of looking at Captain America as a big budget sequel. Obviously, it's not the same character, but it's
Right,
a hero. It's the right time frame. Now we're in World War II. It's a little bit after when the Rocketeer takes place. Obviously, a bigger budget. Obviously, better special effects, and that is just it's a nice lens to look at that through. Maybe a spiritual successor to the Rocketeer.
Yeah, I think that's a nice way to look at it.
Now, I watched this movie on Disney Plus, and Mike mentions a short-lived kids show. Yes. I did not know this thing existed until I searched Rocke,
and it's the first thing that comes up.
Oh. And yeah, before the movie, there's this kids show. You can tell by the thumbnail it's a kids show. It's animated, yes. And there's a little kid as the Rocketeer in like a pinkish, purplish outfit. It says the Rocketeer. And I'll be honest, Andrew, the first thing that came to mind wasn't the most #PP thought. I was like, what? Like, this isn't the Rocketeer. Like, what is this? Did Disney just take this name, take this property, slap it on a kid's show, and call it the Rocketeer? But after I watched the movie, I did watch the first episode from this series. And I'll admit, I read up on the Wikipedia a little bit to kind of find out what was going on here. And it is essentially a sequel to this movie, a legacy sequel, as it were.
As it were, yeah.
The main character of Kit is the great-granddaughter of Cliff that we see in this movie. And to further connect it to the movie, Kit's father in the movie is voiced by Billy Campbell, which is really cool.
And Billy Campbell, also in the archive footage of Cliff, voices him as well.
Awesome. In Kit's bedroom, she has an Art Deco style poster of the Rocketeer that looks just like the movie poster here. There's a lot of little connections like that. The Bulldog Cafe you mentioned a second ago is prominent in this movie. Her grandfather in this movie, which I guess would be Cliff's kid, if I'm keeping this right.
This is a show, not a movie.
Her grandfather in the show, which I guess would be Cliff's son, is the mechanic character, the mentor character, is voiced by Frank Welker. And of course, she has a sidekick that's a bulldog, and the bulldog is also voiced by Frank Welker. Because why not?
No, those first I had that on. Like, I finished watching The Rocketeer and then was doing stuff all day, and like I just left that show on in the background while I was doing stuff, and like kept coming in and out. But there's so many little, like the Bulldog Cafe is there, and like in the first episode, her dad has a malfunction while he's flying his plane, and we get a very similar unveiling sequence of like Kit's Rocketeer saving her dad's plane, but there's the guy running the air show when something is actually going wrong is doing the same kind of all part of the show, folks. Nothing. They don't leave. Don't think there's anything wrong. It's all normal. Like a lot of little allusions like that, which I thought was a nice touch. Obviously, I was reading it's a show meant for like 2 to 5 year olds. So it's not really.
Yeah, let me be clear. If you love the movie, I'm not saying you have to rush out there and binge this series. It's not going to feel like the sequel you've always wanted. It is very much a kid show, which isn't a bad thing, but it's it's
very much like it's very much aimed at kids. Like every show has like some base lesson. Like the first episode is a lot about like, she's got her friend that has his extreme bikes and stuff, and he gets his own code name and everything later. But like a lot of them, it's like, you guys have to, listen to each other, like collaborate on things. Like it's a lot of, your base simple lessons. But I watched an unreasonable amount of that show today, and it was fine. I like very much, obviously not meant for somebody that's, 34, but I thought it was pretty well done overall, especially with all like the Easter eggs and stuff it pulled in. Like, like whoever made it, I did the homework. I'll give them that for sure.
Yeah, that unveiling scene you mentioned is very similar to Cliff's unveiling scene in the movie, where she has to fly up and save this malfunctioning plane. And as another reference, she fixes the plane, which lost a screw, by using her chewing gum to seal the part back in place.
Yep.
So, again, very much, when I saw the thumbnail, my worry was that it would be disrespectful to the source material. And I was happy to be proven wrong. Very cool little follow-up to this movie.
Yeah. Like I said, it takes place in some fictional town called Hughesville, another analog there to our boy Howard Hughes. but taking
Our
us
boy
out of
Howard Hughes is.
our boy Howard
we
Hughes.
Do we want to put him in that?
No, we
category?
don't. We do
That
not.
illustrious elite crowd of our boys.
Our boy. Oh no, definitely not. But obviously, we're moving it to a more defined, simple location for a kids show. That's not Los Angeles. But yeah, I had fun with it. It was a lot of fun. But there, like I said, there are things you will notice if you're a fan of the movie. You'll definitely see some things pop up while you learn lessons about teamwork.
Thanks again, Mike from Maine, for writing that email. And remember, if there is a comic book adaptation that was poorly received that you like, you can write in as well. bestoftherestpod@gmail.com. When we cover that movie, we will read your thoughts on an episode. Or if you just want us to cover a movie, your email might be the reason that we cover it. I recently received an email asking about Constantine. Send us some of their positive thoughts. And you know what, Andrew? We are going to cover Constantine soon and read that email on that episode.
We will.
Alternatively, you can also just hop into our Discord. There is a link in the show notes, and you can share your positive thoughts there, as well as hang out with our community. Whatever's more convenient for you, we will get the message out there. Andrew, I love opening title sequences. And this movie, has a pretty good opening titles. Nothing too fancy. It's not a James Bond cinematic experience.
Right.
Mostly it's just yellow letters on a black screen. But whenever it shows The Rocketeer, when it reveals the title, the black screen splits in half and you realize that it's actually the bay doors of the hangar where the airplane is coming out of. And that was just such a cool little transition. I love thoughts being put into those opening title sequences.
Yeah, it was definitely a fun way to start the movie off, and definitely gave us a cool little segue into our opening flight sequence. Which, by the way, I have to say, that plane he's flying, the GB, looks cool as hell. Just a cool looking plane with the pilot in the back, cool design, cool everything.
There's an opening car chase sequence in this movie. This is kind of what sets off the events. They've stolen the rocket pack. They're getting hunted down by the FBI. And this was the first line that I wrote down. I wrote down a lot of lines in this movie because this movie has some really cool dialogue. And I wrote this line down. The FBI guys end up getting their car totaled. And one of the guys says, "This is the third car in a month. Hoover's going to be spitting nails." I've never heard that phrase before, spitting nails. But I guess that means like you're really angry. You're shouting at somebody, spitting nails.
Because if somebody spits a nail at you, it's dangerous, Chris.
Oh, okay, thanks. But also just that car chase in general is just a great action set piece, nice physical, practical stunts. In particular, the plane that Cliff is flying gets shot up a bit and is coming down. And as it's landing, it collides with one of the cars and it knocks one of the wheels off the plane. Again, these are like real vehicles smashing into one another. Old school Hollywood stuff. Always love it.
Yep. Cool stuff. And just a great, like I said, this is contrasted with the opening flight sequence and just makes for a really good intro to this movie.
And another early note here is that those FBI guys are so rude.
They're needlessly rude. Like, they
shot
really
up
are.
this
Like,
guy's plane, and Cliff and Peavy are like, "We made a living with that plane." And this is the line. This is what the FBI guy said. He says, "Well, maybe it's time to get a real job." What?
Yeah, just like needlessly antagonistic. Just like really, really like dialing it up for no reason there. And then he punches him.
Yes, we get our first Cliff awesome old school Hollywood punch. A real Indiana Jones punch. A real full crossbody. Captain America knocking out Hitler. A great solid across the face punch. There's a few of them throughout the movie. Always great.
And to his credit, the other FBI guy goes, "Well, maybe you deserved it."
Yeah, it's just that one FBI guy in particular is a real jerk.
Yep,
Is that what the G in G-Man stands for? Jerk?
What?
Does that not work?
Yes, Chris, jerk starts with a G. Oh.
Yeah, when you're a G-Man. I'm going to have a real hard time deciding whether or not to keep that in the episode.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God.
I've got another line written down from these opening scenes that is so good. Tells us a lot about the characters. Cliff tells Peevy, "I could fly a shoebox if it had wings, Peeve." Awesome. Beautiful. Yeah. Good. So good.
There's a line or go ahead if you have more from the opening sequence.
No, I've got nothing clever to say about it other than I really like that line.
It's a very good line. I like, there's a line I chuckled at during the kind of post-first flight sequence where he's flying around trying to stop, basically. And he ends up flying through this, like, cornfield or something, and he, like, digs up a whole bunch of the plants, and these two guys are just watching him. And after he flies out and goes on, they both just sit. One of them just goes, "Big gopher," and he just goes on with his life. And I was like, what? He just says it so casually. I was like, all right, I guess this is a thing you deal with regularly.
The movie's got a pretty good sense of humor, a lot of good gags. My favorite one is probably when Jenny and Sinclair are out at dinner, because Sinclair is starting his evil plan of seducing her, and he's a big star. She's an up-and-coming actress. Takes her out to dinner. How could this go wrong? And sort of to spy on him, Cliff disguises himself as a waiter and comes up to their table. And he's just like looking for an excuse to not leave the table. So he like takes the drink orders and then he starts just messing with the flowers. There's like 3 flowers and he keeps like rearranging them in different patterns to eventually they both stop talking and they're just staring at him, just shuffling these flowers because he's not walking away. Fun visual gag. I loved it.
I love in that same sequence, there's a bit where Neville is talking to Eddie and they're going back and forth, and Eddie's kind of telling me, he's like, this isn't really how I do things. And at one point, Neville Sinclair, I don't even remember exactly why he says it, but he tells him that he's the number 3 box office star in America, and then walks out the door. And then Eddie just takes his cigar and goes like, "Number 3 jerk," and throws the cigar at the door. I was like, just so angry, and that was the best he could come up with.
Yeah, I got still number 3. Like, you're gonna make him like the number 1 jerk.
Yeah, he's like, nope, number 3 jerk, which implies Eddie knows the number 1 and number 2 jerk. So we'll see.
I hope that's what's explored in the sequel.
I hope the number 1 and number 2 jerks. No, there is if you are at all familiar with Howard Hughes, there is an Easter egg in a sequence where Cliff escapes from his office hangar thing. But what he does is he uses a model of what will become known as the Spruce Goose to glide out of this hangar, and then the thing keeps flying after Cliff lets go of it. And you can censor this, but what Howard Hughes says is, "The son of a bitch will fly." Now, if you don't know what the Spruce Goose is, you probably have no idea what he means here, or why this is a big deal, or why it's important.
Enlighten us, Andrew.
So this was a plane that was called the Hughes H-4 Hercules, and it was a prototype airlift flying boat that was intended as a flight transport for use during World War II, but it was not completed in time to be used for the war, and only ever actually flew once. But it did fly once, to be fair. But it was a boat built out of wood that flew. So it was a plane. Sorry, not a boat built out of wood. Jesus, Andrew. It was a plane built from wood, because during the wartime restrictions, aluminum, concerns about weight, and all of this, they couldn't really get it. So he's like, fine, we'll build this boat out of wood. And so it was built mostly out of birch, yet it still got the nickname the Spruce Goose, because people were like, this is the dumbest thing in the world. But yeah, that sequence where he flies out on the model and it keeps flying, Howard is like, oh, that's apparently the eureka moment that his wood plane will fly, apparently. And it flew once, briefly, and now it's on display forever. But I thought that was a very strange, deep cut to be held within the walls of this movie. But apparently they felt they needed some more Howard Hughes Easter eggs for us.
I mean, I certainly didn't catch it. Thank you, comic book expert turned aviation expert Andrew Williams, for letting us in on that.
I had to look it up. I'm not going to pretend that I knew that ahead. That's not something where Andrew just rolled out of bed and knew that. That was something where, like, he said that, and I was like, why why? What why did you just say this just now? I don't understand. So I had to go look up what it was. So today, Andrew read on the history of the Hughes H-4 Hercules, also known as the Spruce Goose, on display at the Evergreen Aviation and Space Museum.
Good to know, Andrew. Leading into this finale, I love the scene right before we get into all the action. Cliff is showing up to meet Sinclair, and the deal is he hands over the rocket and he gets Ginny back. That's what's supposed to happen. But of course, he can't just give this rocket to the Nazis. He saw the cartoon. He knows what they're going to do with it. They're going to make flying Nazis that take over the world. You can't let that happen. So at the standoff, it's just Cliff on one side. And then on the other side, you've got Sinclair, and you've got the mob that he's hired, and they're holding Ginny captive. And the way he gets out of this is he just airs Sinclair's dirty laundry. He just asks the mob guy, he asks Eddie, he's like, how does it feel working for a Nazi? Because the mob has no idea that Sinclair is actually a Nazi spy.
Mm-hmm.
And immediately Eddie turns to Sinclair and is like, what is he talking about? Is this true? And eventually the truth comes out, and the mob flips on Sinclair because fuck Nazis, because everybody hates Nazis, right?
Joker
that message,
hates Nazis, folks.
That message is so clear in this movie. I love it so much. I in particular love this line that holds so much weight. It means a lot of things, Andrew. Let's break it down. Or maybe not.
Sure.
Let me tell you what the line is. Eddie Valentine says, I may not make an honest buck, but I'm 100% American. Which, on the one hand, is kind of patriotic, but on the other hand, it's like kind of telling about what it means to be American.
Yeah, a little bit.
You can read in that a lot, but it's great. I love that everyone in the end of this movie gets united in their hatred for Nazis, because the FBI show up and they're literally fighting alongside the mobsters. There's this fun scene with Eddie Valentine hiding behind a statue and shooting his Tommy gun, and one of the FBI agents is shooting their rifle that are side by side, and they stop and look at each other, and they look back at the Nazis, and they keep on firing. They're like, yep, we're on the same side on this fight.
Yep. For this time, we're all together. There's legit a sequence in one of the Marvel DC crossovers where Joker and Red Skull come face to face, and Red Skull makes some comment about like the fatherland and the Nazis, and Joker is literally like, whoa, 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 what do you, no.
Yeah.
Like, he, like, legit is like, I may be a criminal and a psychopath, but I'm an American criminal, and it's very out of character for Joker. Like, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever, but it's a similar vibe of, like, I'm not going to be a Nazi. So, folks, even Joker knows Nazis are bad. So let's just run with that piece of it. But yeah, similar vibe. My one last favorite line is, this is Alan Arkin kind of showing some shades of the Alan Arkin we'd come to know, but it's right at the end where, like, I forget what the exact... Actually, I have the exact line. Hold on. It says, film fans were saddened by the news that actor Neville Sinclair was killed in a tragedy when flaming debris fell on his touring car. And he goes, that's terrible. That was a nice car. So I was like, yep, there's Alan Arkin. I knew he was going to show up eventually. But yeah. Man, this movie's great, guys. Go watch it.
It is. It's very much in the vein of, how many times we talked about this, pulp heroes coming to the big screen in the 90s. It's like, Andrew, I gotta imagine there's like one producer in Hollywood who saw Batman 89 take off, and he's like, pulp heroes, that's the next big thing, I'm telling you. And then they do the Rocketeer, it bombs. They do the Shadow, it flops. They do the Phantom, it's panned. And then I imagine, like, finally the Mask of Zorro comes out and it's a big hit. He's like, you see? I told you. Pulp heroes. I knew all along.
Well, and this one's funny because, like, they apparently were trying to get it made as a film in, like, the mid-'80s. And, like, nobody would touch it for, like, a budget. They were like,
it's a bit of a Watchmen situation. As soon as the book comes out, they immediately start trying to make it a film.
But yeah, like Dave Stevens was like, I see this as a movie. He was Mark Miller 20 years before. But so he tried. And so, to be fair, there's not a lot of Dave Stevens Rocketeer comics. It's not like there was some decades-long run or anything, but
it's interesting. The movie says it's based on the graphic novel by Dave Stevens, which isn't a term you heard a whole lot. That's a relatively new kind of term, graphic novel. So I thought it was interesting that they used that.
That's how they describe it. Yeah. It was, and because like the comic debuts in like backups in different comics off and on, and then I think finally it's published in like a single volume. And I think that's what they were kind of referring to. But yeah, they tried in the mid '80s, but I think Dave Stevens even said he's like, this was before Batman. This was before Dick Tracy. Even he was like, nobody was touching pulp heroes at that point. And then he says once Batman hit, suddenly everybody was back trying. They were like They were like, bring that back, get it back over here. And so they were suddenly back on board. And hell, at one point he said that him, Bilson DeMeo, and William Deere, one of the previous directors, they apparently tried to like self-finance it as like a low-budget black and white film. Even kind of glad they didn't. Can't imagine how that would have come off. But
like make it actually look like a serial that could have been produced in the 30s.
Probably, I feel like that was definitely the vibe because that would have been cheap. But but yeah, so they apparently really were trying to do that, and it, like I said, the patience or irritation or annoyance finally paid off when Disney came back around. But yeah, it was something they were trying from. I mean, the comic comes out in '82. I think as early as '84, they were talking about film adaptations. So,
well, Andrew, tell us. We ask this every episode. We ask you specifically, comic book expert Andrew Williams. How does this movie function as an adaptation of the character in the story of The Rocketeer? How successful is this adaptation in your summation?
Well, the most important part is the hair is 100% page accurate. The hair is from page to screen. It's perfect.
Wonderful.
But
great hair.
No, I actually, after I watched it, I just went on, like, I'd read some of the stuff when because there was a big IDW revival of The Rocketeer maybe 10 years ago, and they got a bunch of different writers because Dave Stevens unfortunately passed in 2008, and he had chosen Laura Martin, a new colorist, to recolor all of his classic Rocketeer comics, and IDW eventually published that, but I didn't catch that. So when they started doing like new stories, I kind of checked those out, and they were pretty good. But I went looking, and you can't buy the physical copy, but Kindle had the Dave Stevens Rocketeer collection on sale for $6. Nice. So I was like, that's worth checking out. So I bought that, and I was reading through it. The biggest change, obviously, is Betty turning into Jenny. That's like the biggest thing that I noticed more than anything. Is like in the original, she's straight up Betty Page. That's the look, the design, everything. She's just 100% Betty Page. And so she's like she hangs out, and like Cliff bemoans that she hangs out with like these Hollywood types, and like she's hanging out with this photographer that Cliff thinks is really skeezy, and like he's taking like pinup photos, and like she's very much like damsel in distress, Betty Page, erotic type model type stuff. So I'm not shocked at all that got changed, and I think for this movie especially, I think it's a better change for the character. Overall, though, you're getting a similar story. You're like, obviously, the Rocket Pack is part of a conflict between America and the Nazis. The Nazis are involved. Howard Hughes is not present, but at one point, Peavy figures out that this Rocket Pack, has to have been developed by Howard Hughes. Like, so you're getting an expanded story. Like, they're getting rid of like the skeevy photographer and kind of turning that more into Neville Sinclair's character being this actor, but also bringing him into the Rocketeer plot, because initially those two things are separate. Betty's whole photographer Hollywood thing doesn't have anything to do with what Cliff's doing. She just ends up involved in it. And this one, they kind of merge it all together. But I think this is a story that I think was cracked with Dave Stevens' involvement. He had been working with Bilson and DeMeo the whole time. And so I think you get a pretty accurate vibe for what I think he was going for. You could argue that in the comics, Cliff is a little bit rougher around the edges, personality-wise. He's a little bit more of a jerk, but I think the way he's portrayed here is kind of rough around the edges, more in like a unpolished way. I think works really well. But yeah, they're good comics, and the new coloring by Laura Martin is fantastic. The art looks as vibrant as ever, and I really recommend checking that out if you haven't had a chance. Lothar does appear in those comics. He's not in the first story. He's actually in the second story, which doesn't involve the Nazis, at least thus far, at all. It's actually kind of a weird revenge plot. Lothar is actually in that comic. They propose that Cliff used to be part of like a traveling circus, and believe it or not, Lothar used to be part of that circus. So if you need to kind of understand where the vibe of that character came from, that definitely explains it. But literally, it's like page to screen, like 100%. They got the face design, everything. It's 100%. So they definitely, when putting this story together, were plucking bits and pieces from different parts of it to be here. And yeah, I think it functions pretty well as an adaptation. And that, like I said, Stevens was involved pretty heavily with the development of that script, so that doesn't shock me. But yeah, I would actually, if it's still on sale, even if it's not, I'd check it out.
You know, Andrew, Disney Plus is really becoming a home to like legacy sequel TV shows and movies, right? We got the Mighty Ducks follow up, some various direct to Disney Plus sequels. You watching a lot of these? I think I know you're watching the Mighty Ducks one, right?
I watched the first season of Mighty Ducks. Emilio Estevez coming back to that franchise was an interesting one. Him being absent from the second season definitely decreases my interest in it. But yeah, they did that. They did the Home Alone kind of sidequel with the only recurring character in that is Buzz as a cop. But otherwise, that's a whole new story.
Of course, Buzz becomes a cop.
Of course he does. Of all the professions you expected Buzz to have, cop is number one on that list. But then obviously we've got the Rocketeer stuff coming. We've got Joe Johnston and Rick Moranis coming back for a Honey, I Shrunk the Kids legacy follow-up. So, I mean, I feel like in a lot of cases, it's just an easy thing to do. You're banking on everybody's nostalgia for properties. I mean, I don't think it's a lot of these. It's probably not too much out of Disney's book to make it, especially when Buzz is your only recurring actor. I'm sure he's not too expensive, but yeah, we'll see. I mean, but yeah, Disney Plus is definitely. I mean, everybody. It feels like if you were a fan of anything as a kid, it's coming back somehow.
Legacy sequels, man, they're everything right now.
They're
Cobra
everything.
Kai, and it's not Disney Plus.
Cobra Kai kind of. Yeah, it was a big kind of on the forefront of it, like before it was kind of a thing, really. Or hell, even Cobra Kai might be the one that started it. Who knows? Like the idea that you could make it like a bankable series or something. But
of course, the Star Wars sequels, Blade Runner,
Star Trek,
Ghostbusters,
I mean, they brought back Picard.
Star Trek, sure.
It's everything. What's old is new. Time is a flat circle, man.
Whatever. If it's good, it's good, right?
Yeah.
I mean, some of those might be, you could say, cash grabs, just banking on nostalgia, not quality storytelling. I don't know, but when it's good, it's good. Andrew, we were talking before we recorded about the new Scream movie. We're both big fans of that. Very much a legacy sequel, very much kind of having fun with the idea as a legacy sequel, as that series likes to do. That's meta references, but like I said, when it's good, it's good.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, isn't everything a cash grab? Is any movie made without hope that it makes money? I mean...
It's a business. We got to remember that, right?
Yep.
That's kind of a downer place to take this.
Well, no, that's always been a strange criticism to me. They're like, it's just a cash grab, and I'm like, well, yeah, a studio makes a movie because they want it to make money. Like, is that really like? Are you shocked by this? Like, I don't like. At the end of the day, the movie's gonna stand or float on its own merits. Like,
I mean, you don't think James Cameron is making 17 Avatar movies because he feels compelled to tell this story? To push the art of cinema forward, Andrew? You think James Cameron just wants more money?
Yes, I do. James Cameron is sitting there on his pile of money and goes, you know what would be cooler? More of this.
Have you heard the story of him pitching Aliens to the studio?
No.
The legend is that his pitch was simply, I mean, imagine like a boardroom of studio execs.
Yeah.
And he writes on like a chalkboard, Alien. And then, everybody lets that sit, adds an S to the end of it. Like, huh? Aliens? And then changes the S into a $sign. And that's the pitch, and that became Aliens.
That's awesome. That would be such a baller move.
It really is. And to his credit, he made one of the best sequels of all time, so
he did.
What movie, what franchise can you just pitch that? Just add an S to the franchise.
Didn't they try that with Predator?
They did, yeah. Predators. I wonder if that was the pitch there. Predator?
Just a guy Robert Rodriguez walked up. I would love to be able to do it. Go up to Ghostbusters, just add another S and a $.
Ghostbusters.
Ghostbusters.
Hey, you thought Jaws was good.
Jaws.
Could not come up with the worst examples.
Amazing.
while you are pondering these deep questions like, are movies just made to make money? You can head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review for this show. It's something fast, free, and fun that you can do that makes a big difference for us and helps with the visibility of our show. And I always ask you to go one step farther, leave a review for every podcast that you listen to regularly. All of those creators are certainly going to appreciate the nice words being said, and I know we certainly appreciate it, and you can bet we will read your review on a future episode. But until then, just remember that maybe not every movie is great.
But all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. Follow him on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. Thanks to Mitch of Depressed to Impress for the music. Check him out on YouTube and Twitch.tv. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. It's the only way that we grow. And follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you.
Boom. Yeah, I mean he's the creator of the X3 jetpack, basically, and that's
Excuse me, Rocket Pack, Andrew?
Rocket Pack. I'm sorry.
They do not say jetpack. They make it a point not to ever say jetpack in this movie. It's either a rocket pack or a rocket.
He like escapes from Howard Hughes' place and goes to get the jetpack and do this final confrontation with them. Timothy Dalton crashes a jetpack into the land part of the Hollywood
Andrew.
land sign.
It's not. It's what's it called? What's he crashed?
Oh, sorry. But at one point, Peavy figures out that this rocket pack. I'm sorry. And at this point, we know the jetpack belongs to Howard Hughes. And,
rocket pack, Andrew.
Sorry. I want you to censor every time I say jetpack and correct me with rocket pack.
What the hell was Andrew calling that thing?